The number 10 high-powered offense of all time, the 1994 San Francisco 49ers.
We're the number 1 offense in the league that year.
I'm gonna be honest with you.
How can you be number 10?
Prime, I did not like you when you was with the 49ers. Now, you can't play for the 49ers.
This ain't got nothing to do with your personal opinion.
Okay, Prime.
So you can't bring personal opinion into
yes, you
football.
can.
No,
Prime,
you
that's
can't.
just the way I felt.
And we feel the team that scored more points and more touchdowns than any team in 1994 belongs at number 10.
Young throws downfield. Jerry Rice. He's at the 15. He's at the 10.
I think when you look at other teams and other eras, there were certain points where you felt like this team can rally to win. This team can do what it takes to win. Every time that Steve Young and that 49ers offense got under center in that 94 season, you felt like they're scoring every time they touched the ball. And when they didn't, it was actually a huge surprise.
If the offense exploded that season, Steve Young lit the fuse. In the finest season of his career, Young was named NFL MVP for the second time.
Man, you got to start with Steve Young. He was a guy who could literally throw for 300 yards, and he probably could almost run for 100.
Steve was a tremendously highly accurate passer.
Touchdown 49ers!
And I think that was one of the greatest single seasons a quarterback ever had.
If not the greatest. Young threw 35 touchdowns, completed 70% of his passes, and set the NFL record for the highest passer rating in a single season.
Steve not only was able to throw the ball effectively, they ran the ball effectively, and he was a part of that running game that made them so difficult to defend.
Dives into the goal line. Touchdown 49ers!
But really, how can talk of the 1994 49ers not center around the GOAT, Jerry Rice, playing in his 10th season?
Young throws downfield. Jerry Rice. He's got it.
Jerry Rice was still doing it. He had almost 1,500 yards that season. He had a 74% catch rate. He was just catching anything Steve Young threw at him.
The Niners won the NFC West in '94. They cruised into the playoffs where they won each game by an average of nearly 21 points.
That offense really shut everyone up because they went 13-3. They were the biggest favorites in the history of the Super Bowl.
The Super Bowl was such a letdown because we're in Miami playing the Chargers, and the first quarter, the game's over.
And he is looking for Jerry. And Rice is there. And he's into the end zone. Touchdown 49ers!
Jerry Rice had already scored a couple touchdowns. It was done.
Someone take the monkey off my back, please.
They have ripped the monkey from Steve Young's back. He's like, I have a thing on my back. It's not scoliosis, it's a large orangutan. How did he throw passes if you have a large primate on your shoulders? We will never know.
The number 9 high-powered offense of all time, the 2011 New Orleans Saints.
5,300 passing yards in a season. That's incredible.
Meacham has the touchdown.
And that's what number on this list?
Number 9.
9? See, look, Drew Brees not getting the credit he deserves once again.
Here we go, Drew.
Drew Brees may be overlooked, but his 2011 season wasn't. He and head coach Sean Payton led the Saints to a 13-3 mark, tied for the best record in franchise history.
I think this is the perfect mash of Drew Brees coming together with Sean Payton and really hitting their stride.
Brees and Peyton have been together a long time. Not many quarterbacks and head coaches have the chance to build almost a decade plus of continuity, and that's what Drew Brees and Sean Payton have had.
Sense of urgency, however you can get through there, get to your landmark.
This is Drew Brees, who unfortunately, for some reason, maybe it's because the offensive scheme that he plays in, never gets mentioned as like one of the top 3 quarterbacks of all time. I don't understand that.
Drew's numbers from 2011 are staggering. 7 straight 300-yard passing games, a record 5,347 passing yards, and a stunning 71% completion rate.
Not only is that hard to pull off, but he's completing this doing it down the field. So to complete 71% of your passes when you're throwing the ball like that is really one of the best accomplishments of all time.
Leaping reception is made for the score.
He was so great. Drew Brees is not so tall. I'm more taller than Drew Brees. And yet his tosses was so fast and magical. I love that about him.
Here's Brees throwing the fade for Lance Moore, and Lance Moore has taken it in for the score.
The secret weapon in that offense was the smallest weapon. At 5'6", Darren Sproles set a season record with nearly 2,700 all-purpose yards.
Because he's so tiny, he's just more aerodynamic than the other guys on the field, and that's sort of how he gets all of those stats.
It's a touchdown! Slippery little super smurf, Darren Sproles.
The 2011 Saints didn't have the biggest players, but now they stand tall as the number 9 high-powered offense of all time.
The number 8 high-powered offense of all time. The 1981 San Diego Chargers.
Eric Coryell, Kellen Winslow as a tight end, the running back, Chuck Muncie, and of course the great Dan Fouts.
Recite the roster all you want. This offense was stacked with stats and innovation.
I think statistically, the 81 Chargers, I see why you have them where you do, but what's the legacy? You know, I don't know that some of the offenses that you're going to have on this list have any kind of legacy. The 81 Chargers have a legacy.
Their legacy simply was Air Coryell. Coach Don Coryell's air assault offense was a breakthrough, and in 1981, it was shattering defenses. Dan Fouts threw 33 touchdowns for over 4,800 yards, unheard of numbers for that era.
I covered the Oakland Raiders back then, and the Raiders with all these great, scary guys, John Matuzak and Lester Hayes and Ted Hendricks, they were scared to death of Air Coryell, for good reason.
It was precision passing at its finest in terms of set your back foot, get rid of the football, and hit the receiver before he breaks. It was poetry in motion.
This was an incredible offense, but all you ever heard about was Air Coryell and the Chargers. Chuck Muncie had 19 rushing touchdowns that year, and he did it while wearing your grandfather's reading glasses.
Chuck Muncie was the one that made it all work. He's running like crazy for 1,000 yards, which was a big deal back then. That allowed those wide receivers and Kellen Winslow to do all the magic that they did.
Kellen Winslow tricked opponents all season. The wide receiver in tight end clothing caught 88 passes for nearly 1,100 yards.
Big-bodied guy, looks like a wide receiver, moves like a wide receiver, but has the body of a lineman. Like, he was the X factor for that team.
In the old days, the tight end was just a blocker. When they came on with Kellen Winslow, I think they changed that whole dynamic of the NFL, where now you've got these tight ends who are just as good as wide receivers.
Guys like him paved the way for future guys like Shannon Sharp and players like that. So this Chargers team was ahead of the game.
The Chargers possessed the most potent offense in league history and set scores of records. But like the heroes of classic drama, they were not without flaws.
The Chargers went 10-6 in 1981. They won their 3rd straight divisional crown, but never did make it to the Super Bowl.
The only thing that stopped the Chargers was the cold.
Riverfront Stadium, Cincinnati. The AFC Championship.
They played in a game, it was minus 59 degrees. That was the only thing that stopped them. Plus, they played a 6-hour game the week before against Miami. Probably one of the most exhausting games. Kellen Winslow being taken off the field with his teammates. So it was a lot to ask.
Playoff sagas aside, the 81 Chargers not only made their mark on our list, they made their mark on offenses for years to come.
Did you know that the Cowboy team that won Super Bowls 27, 28, and 30 won with the same offense, essentially, as the Chargers teams from the early 80s? Same numbering system. They changed a lot of what teams did.
The number 7 high-powered offense of all time, the 1950 Los Angeles Rams.
It's an offense that was obviously 40 years ahead of its time when you think about it.
Don't let the black and white footage fool you. The 1950 Los Angeles Rams were not your great-grandfather's normal cup of oval team, and that is what makes them the number 7 high-powered offense of all time.
And they're doing it by throwing the football, which for a lot of people was heresy.
In the 1950s, a lot of teams just ran the football, but the LA Rams were a little bit different.
The Rams in 1950, they had 2 quarterbacks.
They had Norm Van Brocklin, and they had Bob Waterfield.
The Rams, led by Bob Waterfield, make their appearance.
Each of them started 6 games, and they would rotate in and out, and they had a very prolific passing offense.
It's Waterfield again doing the damage.
They really brought the passing game into the 50s. Without the 1950 Rams, there's a case to be made that the passing game doesn't take off as much as it could.
Again, it's Van Brocklin throwing the leather for the famed Los Angeles Rams.
It was something exciting. It wasn't like boring old football. Here's Steve Van Buren running 4 yards. It's Bob Waterfield and Norm Van Brocklin just slinging that rock.
Van Brocklin gets off a tremendous heave.
1950 Rams, Bob Waterfield, Hall of Fame. They had a young Norm Van Brocklin, Hall of Fame at quarterback. They've got a great possession receiver in Tom Fears, who had the record for the longest time. He caught 18 balls in a game.
Crazy Tom Fears gathers it in on the dead run.
And then they had the burner, Elroy Crazy Legs Hurst.
So teams just didn't know how to cope with them. They didn't know how to prepare for them. They didn't know how to match up with them. And frankly, they couldn't.
The Rams' abundance of talent led to them setting an NFL record for highest scoring offense per game, a record that has remained unbroken for over 6 decades.
They scored 466 points that season. That was 100 points more than the next closest team, which was the New York Yanks. They averaged over 38 points per game.
38.8. 38.8 with no player safety rules, no illegal contact, right?
Scoring 39 points a game in 1950 is like somebody scoring 69 points a game today.
Waterfield reached down into his bag of tricks for an old Waterfield special.
Still the only team to score 60 or more points twice in a season. Our number 7 high-powered offense was a harbinger of things to come.
If you are really going by which team was the most dominant in its era, there's a good argument that the 1950 Rams should rank first.
It was one of the first true modern offenses in the NFL.
Bob Waterfield, the Rams star passer, gets off a touchdown aerial.
The number 6 high-powered offense of all time, the 1983 Washington Redskins.
They were coming off the strike year of '82, and they won the Super Bowl theoretically that year. But a lot of people weren't taking that too seriously because of the shortened season. For them to come back in '83 and just go wild as they did offensively, that was pretty impressive. Not impressive enough to be in the top 5 or the top 4, but nevertheless, it was impressive.
We agree. But unlike other offenses that stormed the league, the '83 Skins had less lightning, but all the thunder.
What I remember most was just a ginormous hogs of the offensive line of the Washington Redskins.
I love them hogs. I love them hogs. I love them hogs. Yeah, I love them hogs.
This was a team that ran that counter trey.
Power football.
And you saw them against the Giants.
Bam, bam, bam.
When John Madden was doing the game, it was always the counter trey, the counter trey, the counter trey.
Riggins has been named an honorary groundhog, but number 44 is more akin to a bull.
They were just a bruising team. John Riggins had this ability to not only wear down defenses, but then find that second gear in the fourth quarter.
John Riggins ran for 1,300 yards, and he's already like 34 years old at that point.
Riggins stole the headlines, but this offense had layers. It didn't set an NFL record with 541 points, 3 yards at a time.
Joe Theismann was really good. We don't give him enough credit. The fact that he won an MVP.
Yes, the running game was great, but the running game wasn't breaking out any big runs. That wasn't John Riggins' game. They got their big plays outside.
The wide receiver core was just amazing. They had Art Monk, again, a steady presence. They had Charlie Brown. He was an elusive player, a guy kind of like if you would think about Wes Welker now or somebody like that, or Julian Edelman, the kind of smaller receiver who's able to get in there. So they had the fun bunch, and they had a cool end zone celebration, which annoyed the Cowboys, which makes it fun for everybody else.
I'm enraged. I would have grounded all of them or made them do crunches or something.
So magical. Everyone is in unison. They're like, everyone, my hand is feeling kind of cold. I need to heat it up. Will I heat it up with your hand as well? And 6 men said yes.
Washington lost just 2 games in the regular season and may have saved its entire arsenal for the playoff opener.
Man, they go in the playoffs, and they whooped the Rams so bad.
Washington was so overwhelmed that not even a presidential pardon could have saved the Rams on this day.
That's one of the worst blowouts I've ever seen. I think it was 51-7, something like that. It was ridiculous.
But they scored 9 points in the Super Bowl. When you're going through this list, when you get to the Super Bowl, that's really something that stands out to me. Like, are you able to score a lot of points in the Super Bowl? That's when you're playing the best of the best.
Looks off to the left, and he fires it out there. Intercepted! Jack Stolek! Touchdown Raiders!
So, I might judge them a little bit more harshly.
The number 5 high-powered offense of all time, the 1984 Miami Dolphins.
Marino really airing it out against this alleged disciplined deep zone defense by the Rams.
There was no slowing them down. I mean, when they got the ball, they were going to do what they wanted to do.
He looks, lofts to the corner of the end zone. Nat Moore, touchdown.
In 1984, Dan Marino became the first quarterback to throw for over 5,000 yards and set an NFL record with 48 touchdown passes, making the Fins the 5th high-powered offense of all time.
You know, we didn't call them video game numbers because we didn't have video games back then that could put up numbers like the 1984 Dolphins did.
Marino, who was just a different cat altogether. We had not really seen a guy throw a ball like Dan Marino before.
Looks right across the middle. He's got Clayton open. Touchdown, Dolphins.
And they had the Marx brothers, Clayton and Duper, both with over 1,300 yards receiving.
He's got Duper down there. He's got it. 30, another 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown, Dolphins.
This was one of the first teams that didn't care. They would throw on first downs. They would sometimes throw with the lead. They would throw vertically on second and short, third and short.
The 1984 Dolphins perfectly fit the profile of what most high-powered offenses are. They're passing offenses. Who led them in rushing?
Who were the running backs on that Dolphins team?
They had Tony Nathan as their top running back.
Tony Nathan was a back, but he was a receiving back. He caught over 60 balls.
Mercury Morris? Larry Zonka? Like, I don't know.
Woody Bennett? Not a name I'm sure a lot of people remember.
Woody Bennett.
606 yards, 7 TDs in that year.
Well, who could forget Woody Bennett except for everybody? There was a time when an NFL quarterback, if he reached 25,000 yards for his career, that was considered the baseline. Like, yeah, that guy's a Hall of Famer. So when Dan Marino came out and hit 5,000, it really showed that the game was taking a step forward, but also it took so long for somebody to match that. You know, that just showed like how out of the ordinary it was.
Man open, touchdown!
The 1984 Dolphins went 14-2 and are the only Dolphins team to score over 500 points in a season. And although they weren't perfect, they are the number 5 high-powered offense of all time.
Here's Marino, wide open field, throws for a touchdown, and there's the record.
I mean, we had never seen anything like that, the way they threw the ball in Miami. That was the best they've ever been.
Marino gets another 3-touchdown game.
I mean, I know the 72 team gets all the glory, but there was never an offense like when Dan Marino came into the league and got good with that team. Are you kidding me?
The number 4 high-powered offense of all time, the 1998 Minnesota Vikings.
98 Vikings are number 4.
Boom! Boom! Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
That was
yes,
a scary
we are.
team.
And I was a fan at this point. Were we not bad then, though?
That was a scary team.
So that year it was Cunningham with Carter and Moss together.
Oh, right.
Imagine those 3 coming together.
You don't have to imagine, you just go to the tapes.
Right to Randy! Right to Randy!
Throws deep, a touchdown! Randy Moss!
This offense was loaded.
Chris Carter.
First down!
Randy Moss.
Oh, sleeping catch for Randy Moss!
Jake Reed.
Touchdown, Jake Reed!
And Robert Smith.
Robert Smith, look out! Here he goes! Pulling away!
You know, Randall Cunningham.
Rolling out Randall Cunningham. Pump fake. He got it. Cunningham on the keeper.
They were dominating that year.
Cunningham, he looks out there and he's laughing. They call me the freak, man. Why they call you the freak? Because I'm a freak of nature. You're going to see today, just keep your eyes glued to the TV.
Our number 4 high-powered offense was loaded with talent, but it was a freak who scored an NFL rookie record of 17 touchdowns that made the '98 Vikings so special.
Fires deep, got Moss, touchdown Vikings!
He was electrifying as a rookie.
Bomb downfield to Moss, down there, juggles in, touchdown!
The reason he's a first ballot Hall of Famer is because the moment that he stepped on the football field as a rookie for the Minnesota Vikings, he was unstoppable.
I mean, it was backyard football, chuck it up, the quarterback just throw it up. He'll just throw it up, the guy can now jump you.
Touchdown Vikings! Leaping catch for Randy Moss!
Well, let me tell you guys, we have the 3 teams that have been 15-1 in the history of the National Football League. All right, give yourselves a round of applause.
Where'd we go? The Vikings scored 556 points in 1998, the most points scored by any team in the 1990s. However, the number 4 high-powered offense is often remembered for something else.
Touchdown Vikings!
Ooh, I was so surprised when they didn't make the Super Bowl.
He's done it all year long. He hasn't missed an extra point or a field goal.
Field goal wins it.
He makes this, pretty much this game is over.
And then I think Gary Anderson was their kicker, and he had like a chip shot to win the game.
39-yard attempt. The spot, the kick by Anderson on the way. It's no good.
And he missed it.
It's like getting punched in the gut for Viking fans all over the United States.
All Vikings fans still feel haunted from that moment.
He hadn't missed a field goal the whole season.
The spot, the kick, wide. No, it's good. I was hoping it was wide, it didn't.
Atlanta going on to go to the Super Bowl. They then lost to the Broncos.
They had the ability to counterpunch. They had the running attack. They had everything except the kicker who could make a field goal in the NFC Championship game. And unfortunately, that's kind of ruining their legacy.
Number 3 high-powered offense of all time, the 2007 New England Patriots.
Just overwhelm opposing defenses. It was frightening.
The Patriots scored on their first drive of the season and never stopped.
Brady fires to Welcome. Touchdown! First touchdown pass of the season scored on the first drive of the season.
It's fun to watch a professional team just tell the NFL to screw off, tell the rest of the league to screw off. We're going to embarrass you each week, and that's what they did.
This is like a midget league team stumbled onto the field against the big boys.
We could say it's a great offense, but let's just say what it is. It's Brady and Moss.
When you have the combination of Brady and Randy Moss, football doesn't get any more fun than that.
Direct snap to Brady. Looks, fires. Touchdown! Randy Moss! Touchdown, Randy Moss!
The 98 Vikings and the 07 Patriots. What do they have in common? Oh, right. Randy Moss.
Randy Moss looked washed up for the Raiders, and so the Patriots, as they're known to do, they got him on a good deal in the trade.
I was actually hanging out with Moss when he got the phone call from the Patriots telling him that he had been traded. Just so much elation came over his face.
It's such a classic Patriots move where you get a guy who's amazing in his career but maybe has some questions and he's older and saying, come sign with us for 1 year or two.
Watching the 07 Patriots was like you expected touchdowns. Like anytime they'd kick a field goal, you'd forget field goals existed. Oh, we kick in this game?
Play action fake. Tom Brady shoots it down the middle. It is caught at the 40, 35, 30. He's going to go all the way. Touchdown, Patriots. Dante Stallworth.
They were really running up the score on teams. I remember that game against the Washington Redskins where it seemed unfair.
Look, starts to run with it. Now he's going to run it and take it in. Touchdown. Fires end zone. Touchdown, Randy Moss.
They were just running up the score on them.
Touchdown, Wes Welker.
Those poor Reds, like, I actually felt bad for them. I'm like, this is kind of weird. Like,
Belichick said after, it's their job to stop us. What are we supposed to do?
The other thing about those 07 Patriots, their average margin of victory was 25 points.
We are not finished. We are not finished, fellas.
And sure enough, 16-0, single-season touchdown record for Moss, single-season touchdown record for Brady, single-season team scoring record in the NFL.
Direct snap to Brady, stands in the pocket, fires it to the right, down the right sideline, and caught at the 20-15, 10-5, touchdown, Patriots. Tom Brady to Randy Moss, and they each have set NFL records on the go-ahead touchdown.
And boy, I'll tell you what, it was a combustible, fiery, just unstoppable duo until they met the Giants in the Super Bowl.
And I know it's kind of hard to say, well, it's unfair to judge them on this one game, but it's like, we're judging the best of all time. We have to bring in all the information. So I think it's kind of a fair ranking. I think that had they won that game, if they had scored 21 points and won that game, I think, without a doubt, this would be the greatest offense of all time. But
the number 2 high-powered offense of all time, the 2013 Denver Broncos.
I think Peyton Manning made the 2013 Broncos the best offense in NFL history.
We can agree to disagree, and we'll leave the 2013 Broncos as the second best. Though their numbers are hard to beat,
Go score again now. More points on the board.
they scored 50 in a game 3 times and set records with the most points and touchdowns in a single season.
DT at midfield, and he is long gone.
Peyton Manning was throwing touchdowns like other teams gained like 1 yard on a quarterback sneak.
Manning's 51st touchdown pass of the year.
I mean, he had 55 touchdowns that year, and it wasn't just Manning. There was an incredible collection of talent around him.
Guys like Julius Thomas, Wes Welker,
Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, those guys right there, it has to be a joy to play with Peyton Manning.
All right, that's just one. All right, you're gonna have plenty more of those.
Because you know that you're throwing the ball a hell of a lot more than you're gonna run it.
The offense was really designed to Manning's strengths. Manning had perfected the art of passing. This was possibly the greatest season for a quarterback ever, and I don't just mean statistically, I mean intellectually. He figured out how to play quarterback in a way no one had ever done before.
Especially coming back from these neck surgeries, and this guy looks like he was born again.
Peyton Manning scampers into the end zone.
He was a born-again quarterback and came back from the dead practically and put together an amazing season.
Some teams need time to find their stride, but our number 2 team made it clear from its very first game that this was no ordinary season.
7 touchdown passes opening game against the Baltimore Ravens. I was there. I saw it. I couldn't believe it.
Manning again in the gun, throws. He's got Thomas again, who's open, and Thomas is into the end zone. Denver touchdown.
7 touchdown passes. Not a bad performance.
Peyton Manning was just picking spots and made it look effortless.
Peyton Manning is hitting everybody. He's got all the time in the world, and his receivers are coming up big.
That was probably the singular game, in my estimation, that Peyton Manning was unbelievable. I came away from that game going, man, these guys are going to be really hard to stop if Peyton Manning can stay healthy.
As a Oakland Raider, I didn't necessarily like to see so much success out of the Denver Broncos, but I was happy to see them lose in the Super Bowl.
And therein lies the controversy, because the number 2 team on our list not only lost the Super Bowl, they were downright crushed.
this has got to be a joke. They didn't even look like they were an NFL team.
The ball is hit as it comes out and it's picked off by the Seahawks.
Like, I would be fine not even having them on the list. I would put the 92 Cowboys on there. I would not have them at number 2.
The first play of the game was a snap over Peyton Manning's head.
1st and 10 at his own 14, and the ball goes into the end zone.
Which you just wouldn't expect from a Peyton Manning team or an offense that had been so efficient all year long.
But that can't discount what they were as an offense. And for Peyton Manning at that point of his career to put up those numbers with those weapons, I know this, if you asked any defensive coach in the history of the game or defensive player, I bet you they'd list Peyton Manning and that offense as the one they'd want to face the least.
The number 1 high-powered offense of all time, the 1999 St. Louis Rams.
The gateway to the West is now the gateway to the best. End zone touchdown Rams.
They're scoring the ball every time. Like, they're going to score every time they touch the ball.
Warner pumps for him, has him at the goal line, touchdown.
The greatest show on turf said all you needed to know.
Caught by Torrey Holt, touchdown Rams.
It was unbelievable what they could do. Bruce, Holt, Orlando Pace, Marshall Faulk, Kurt Warner coming out of nowhere to become the MVP.
What a pass by Kurt Warner.
Kurt Warner, who's a machine of throwing, he's not mobile. He's just sitting there like on a swivel.
Just insane football that was going 100 miles an hour, and it really caught the NFL by surprise.
How about that offense?
The 1999 St. Louis Rams are the #1 high-powered offense of all time and featured the greatest NFL fairy tale ever.
They go into the season thinking they're going to have Trent Green. Free agent signing, it looked like a good mix. It looked like this team's going to step up and be able to do some things, and then he goes out with an injury.
Green drops. A great connection to number 18. Now we got Trent Green down. We've got Trent Green down in the middle of the field. Kurt Warner checks in.
We will rally around Kurt Warner, and we'll play good football.
Kurt Warner? Who's that? I mean, Seattle Seahawks running back, right? That's what everybody thought Kurt Warner was.
Top draft pick, Kurt Warner.
No, Kurt Warner, the guy who used to work at the Hy-Vee grocery store down there on University Avenue.
Kurt Warner, who is very nice, he's like, hey, would you like some paper or some plastic or perhaps some beans?
You know, Kurt Warner, the guy who played arena football and NFL Europe for the Amsterdam Admirals.
Who's going to think that this one-time clerk at the Hy-Vee supermarket is going to turn into one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time?
Love you, Coach. I love you, too. Thanks for the team. You are special.
Warner wasn't the only special player on the '99 Rams. After a preseason trade with the Colts, running back Marshall Faulk became one of the main attractions for the greatest show on turf.
What an effort by Marshall Faulk.
Marshall Faulk has left the Falkland Islands and has come over, and he is running very nice.
He's amazing. Wow.
Marshall Faulk was the key to that offense because the ability to be a 100-yard rusher and a 100-yard receiver in the same game was a threat every game with Marshall Faulk.
Faulk finished the '99 season with 1,048 receiving yards, the second most for a running back in NFL history.
That's the warrior, man. That's the warrior.
Working, dog.
The greatest show on turf just came at you in so many ways with the genius Mike Martz and all of his crazy plays.
Just adding to their weaponry. And also that again, Kenny. Pass play for sure. Warner takes off. Touchdown. I don't know who feels more foolish, me or the Falcons defense.
Some of the offenses he drew up would make the hair on your neck stand up. I mean, it was exciting football. You know, they had multiple levels of the field in play. They had deep receivers, they had underneath guys, and they had stuff that you just didn't see other teams doing.
Play action, fake the end around. Warner throws down the middle. He's got a touchdown, St. Louis.
You really felt like you were looking at offense executed at the highest possible level.
Touchdown, Rams!
All right, guys. Last play of the game.
Although a defensive stop gave St. Louis their first Super Bowl title,
Reaches to the goal line. No, he falls at the one.
Didn't make it. Didn't make it. We won it.
The super season ends with a Super Bowl victory.
the legacy of the '99 Rams remains as the team with the #1 high-powered offense of all time.
One play, one score, and they lead it.
It was the first season of 3 seasons in a row that they scored over 500 points.
To me, the '99 Rams are the greatest offense in NFL history.
We're still comparing other teams to the '99 Rams.
Our countdown is complete, but the debate lives on. There are some who didn't like our list, and their opinions were as high-powered as the teams themselves.
I know that the 1999 St. Louis Rams version is the #1 team on this list. They average less points per game.
You have the Broncos of 2013 ahead of the 07 Patriots. That's a little bit of a stretch, I think.
I'd argue Vikings too, but...
First of all, the two best is the Chargers and the Rams, because it's right there in the name. They're ramming and they're charging. Say the Packers, we don't even know what that is. 50 years, how long have they been playing? We still don't know what that is. Browns, good luck.